Well, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed, well, I didn't enjoy the ride. However, I enjoyed it when I got here. I enjoyed the camaraderie when I got here. Wow. Hour and a half from Sonoy, the home of The Walking Dead. Any of you listen to or participate in the South Cars net? You've heard me.
Why?
You've heard me on the South Cars net.
I probably have. I didn't know.
Jeff K1ZN QTH.
Yes.
Sonoy, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead.
It's hard because we're so close. You have to, yeah, it's kind of close. This morning is real short, man. It's real short.
Yeah.
Well,
Worked All Europe is actually the most popular paper-chasing DX awards program in Europe. It's the DXCC award of Europe. And it's a great one. It's one that I've been participating in for a couple of decades. I've got a few of the certificates up on the wall from Worked All Europe. A couple of years ago now, I guess it was 2017, I bought a table for the Southeastern DX Club at the Friedrichshafen Hamfest in Germany, which is there. It's the Dayton of Europe, actually. Very much like our Dayton. It draws from all continents, especially Europe, of course. And we put a table up there, got some members, and it gave us a chance as a club. The Southeastern DX Club, while it was chartered for the Southeastern United States, we have just under 300 members worldwide. And we've had some very die-hard European members in the club for many, many years, and it gave us a chance to actually schmooze with them, get to know them a little bit, bring them greetings, take pictures of them for the folks back home, and that sort of thing. And we certainly welcome new members. We have some members here that are in the Southeastern DX Club, John and Larry. So we welcome you if DX becomes your thing, if it's not there already. Well, what is DX? Now, what do we mean when we say DX and DXing? It's kind of interesting. Distance, exactly. It's kind of interesting. My first DXing, as many folks' initial DXing of my era, was AM band DXing. In fact, a good friend of mine, now a Silent Key, KZ1Z, from Danbury, Connecticut, he too, we used to sit and talk about the days when we would take an AM radio and build a gargantuan receiving antenna. He grew up in New Haven, I grew up in New York City. I didn't have the opportunity to put a dipole or a beam up in a 6-story apartment building complex, but I could certainly do something with Venetian blinds or anything that I could hang out the window. And 2 o'clock in the morning, hearing stations in Los Angeles, Detroit, remember the clear channel stations that were on with 100 kilowatts of power. In those days, you had to tape record them. You made up a QSL receive, an SWL QSL type card. You sent it, the chief engineer sent you back a certificate, and you collected those. And that was the beginning of DXing for any number of us. John, you had to...
Well, I was just going to comment that when I was a preteen, my DX shortwave with a Z.
Yeah, exactly. And that's still alive and well. Many of us as DXers routinely get SWL type cards from folks around the world. Why they're doing it that way versus getting their own license, don't know, doesn't really matter. But you send back a QSL card to their card, and I guess they collect and share and the like. Well, that's what DXing is all about. How many of us here are on the HF bands, or the VHF bands for that matter, doing that kind of DXing? Okay, good, good. Well, as I've gotten to know you a little bit, Aries, public service, HF work, the club is pretty much across the board in terms of the kinds of activities that turn you on in amateur radio. For me as a DXer, obviously any DXer, to be a DXer, has to spend a good amount of time worrying about our antenna foams. Okay? The antenna comes down in the storm, that could put you out of business for a while. And many of us on the bands that we're serious about have redundant antenna systems set up so that we don't find ourselves flat on our backs after a windstorm or some other event like that. What I'm going to talk about this evening is what is DX and DXing? Why do we do it? How do we do it? Where do we do it? Some operating tips, some confirmation tips. What do we mean by confirmation tips? Well, if you're going to go after awards, the awards organizations want proof. They don't trust you. The fact that you said, I got them in a log, all right, great, prove it. And to prove it could be many years in the making. As some of you know, if you've been chasing QSL cards for a while. So we'll talk about that. And that's gotten a little bit easier in the age of computers and information technology with some of the awards programs. Okay, what is DX and DXing? A distant exchange, often with another country, though not exclusively. There are DX awards programs that we participate in that are stateside, worked all states, worked all counties, to name a few. Grid squares, it's a very popular one now. Well, it has been popular for a while, but in the world of FT8, it's become even more popular. I've been chasing worked all counties for close to 50 years. First time around. How many counties are there in the United States? Anybody guess?
2,300?
3,077. 3,077. How many do you have? I'm at 2940 something right now. Confirmed.
Do you know how many of that 3,077 counties have no amateurs in them?
Oh, a good number of them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you exactly, but a good number of them. However, the good news is, in the two U.S. county hunting organizations, MARAC, Mobile Amateur Radio, something or other, and the competing organization, about 20 years ago, the group got into an internal family feud and split into two separate groups. One, and what happened was their operating frequencies then, if you were in Group A, you couldn't operate on Group B's frequencies, so Group B set up their own frequencies and that sort of thing. Both groups have die-hard husband and wife or significant other mobile teams. So on generally spring, summer, and early fall, these folks literally across the country go out and they put counties on the air, and specifically those counties that the preponderance of chasers need, which I'm going to assume translates into counties where there aren't any folks operating. And one guy, K1, I'm forgetting his call now, or anyway, he's a long-haul trucker, and he's got his rig set up in his cab. This guy will go off interstate highways into the hinterlands to work, to put a county on the air for folks that need it. And that's how serious they are about these programs. So, bottom line, I've been working them a long time, but you got to be in front of your radio when the guy's wheels touch down in the particular county that you want. You got to know about it ahead of time, and you got to be there. So, even worked all counties becomes a challenge if you're not retired, although I am now, and sitting in front of your radio 24 hours a day. But it's a neat program. And they have their own rules, and they have their own... I mean, there are guys on the air that have worked 3,077 counties multiple times around. CW, sideband, etc., etc., etc. And then within the states, every state usually has a club that sponsors the counties within that state, and you can get that kind of certificate, including the one county in the United States that has no official counties. Connecticut. Connecticut does not have a system of counties. Now, on the historic map, there are 8 subdivisions that back in the 1817 and 1800s were called counties, but they have no purpose. There's no government associated with them. There's no structure associated with them. But my club, the Candlewood Amateur Radio Association, had a Connecticut Worked All Counties certificate program for folks that wanted to put that up on the wall for having worked all 8 Connecticut counties. And I have that. Okay, so DXing usually is associated with working countries somewhere else, or states, or something else, like grid squares, etc. Special events, Parks on the Air, that's sort of DXing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The ARRL's Parks on the Air program is a pretty popular program. Lighthouses.
What about the space station?
That's pretty distant.
I guess someday that might be. We have, I guess, a lot of us have worked space shots. I know back in Connecticut, I forget which one it was, the club did have an event at a local public school so that the kids could work the space shuttle as it passed over the footprint that included Western Connecticut. And that's doable. I think every U.S. space shot or operation in the last several decades has had at least one licensed amateur on their crew, with a coordination between the government and ARRL to have that individual be able to spend a certain amount of time actually playing radio for those enthusiasts that wanted to be able to work the space shuttles. So that is real. One other program I'll speak to you about tonight, and I know Larry was particularly interested in this one, is the Islands on the Air program, the IOTA program, which I find very challenging and very enjoyable. I spent a couple of years on the International Board of Directors of IOTA Limited, the not-profit British corporation set up to sponsor that program. It used to be an RSGB, Radio Society of Great Britain, program, but it divorced itself or separated itself from RSGB and is now a standalone, not-for-profit, based in Great Britain corporation, sponsoring and structuring the Islands on the Air program. It's a direct competitor, second largest program in the amateur radio world, in DXing. The first one being the DXCC program sponsored by ARRL. How many entities constitutes 100% of DXCC? In other words, I worked them all.
Over 300.
340 present. 340 entities.
Some of those entities have gone away.
Yeah, they come and they go. They come and they go. And there's a board of directors at ARRL overseeing the DXCC program. Right now, there are 340 active. Now, if you come to a Southeastern DX Club meeting, you'll find guys in there that say, I've got 383. You know, if you're pushing 85, 90, that's very possible because they come and they go.
Have you been to the Pigeon Forge?
Yes, W4DXCC. Yeah.
They have the DXers stand up,
Mhm.
and then they have them sit down when they hit 100, 150, 200. There's one guy up there that almost 400, and he was 90 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And on a DXCC awards slip, if you're a part of the DXCC program, you have one of these. You could print it off the logbook of the world on ARRL, and it lists in here, there are two columns, current and total. So that guy might have 397 total, he probably has 340 current. He might not. One of those 340 is extremely difficult to work.
North Korea.
Right, P5. P5. There are no licensed amateurs in P5. You're waiting for the basketball player, what's his name? Rodman? Yeah. You're waiting for him to be sent over there by Trump as a ambassador or something, and hopefully they'll let him bring a radio. If they do, then a number of us will stay up around the clock to work P5. Okay, the point I'm wanting to make is that's the DXCC program, the ARRL DXCC program, the one that the Southeastern DX Club was built around. Those folks are all chasing DXCC, and when we get all 340, we want to get it sideband, then we want to get it CW, then we want to get it digital, then we want to get it on every one of the recognized bands, 160, 80, 40, 30, 20, 17, 12, 10, and what's that other one? 6. I've been chasing DXCC on 6 meters since 1967.
Oh my. When did you first get your ticket, Jeff?
1966, as a novice.
Because prior to that, in the late, and Chuck and Charles knows it, in the late 50s, 6 meters was hot.
Yeah,
Magic.
yeah.
You ask, in the DXing world today, there are many countries that are forbidden with, they used to have a number of countries that you couldn't contact because they were behind, like certain places you had to do, if you went to Russia, you had to send everything to 88 box 88 Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
That's back in the 50s.
Cambodia, I think is still,
Is that right?
I think, isn't it?
Well, Cambodia is on the air.
No, they're not one anymore in the East.
They're regularly on the air now. Well, I would think probably P5, North Korea.
Yeah, North Korea was one of the no-nos.
You know, it's by a special permission. There was an operation there. One of our members of the Southeastern DX Club was able to work them about 4 or 5 years ago now. There was an operation, and I forget who was honchoing it, where they were able to go in sideband only, for a very short period of time, set up, operate with 900 guards standing around, that sort of thing. But it's few and far between.
I would want to go into North Korea.
Oh, there are some DXers worldwide. The club regularly sponsors or throws some money at some of them that do things that you got to really wonder about. They go into third world countries. They set up in
I can
hotel rooms.
understand, like Bobay Island. Yeah, but all you got to do is fight the weather.
Mhm.
You don't have a nutcase like.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I was a German, I had a German license, a DL4ZR, back in the 60s. And I made a contact to a Russian station, and at that time it was a Cold War, and boy, I was sweating for several days. I was saying, oh golly, I wonder if we got permission to do that. And boy, I was sweating for a while, but nobody made any comment. So
Now, the ARRL DX desk, that's the piece of the organization inside the American Radio Relay League that oversees this awards program. They scrutinize the paperwork behind any DX operation, especially something that's going into a unfriendly country or location. They want to be sure it's an absolute above-board legitimate operation. I still have one card sitting on my operating table. It's an African country. I think it's Burkina Faso, where a Polish operator went in there. He did the expedition 4 or 5 days, whatever it was, sent them a card, got back a card, sent it in for credit, and it came back rejected from the league. And the league's comment was, awaiting official paperwork. So I emailed the operator, and eventually he came back to me and said, I'm working on it. Well, this is, 5, 6 years now that he's working on it. Doubt that it'll ever be finished, and I doubt that I'll ever get credit, and the reason is he just couldn't produce the paperwork that showed that he was legitimately in the country doing legitimate radio work from whatever organization within that country's organizational framework governs wireless communication. I regularly go to Curacao Island, PJ2. I go there in March for one of the WPX contests. We have a station down there, the PJ2T Caribbean Contesting Station. And the contest starts Friday night. My wife and I get there Tuesday morning before Friday night. I'm able to operate on that station as PJ2 stroke K1ZN, but I have to get a permit from the Netherlands Curacao Wireless Commission showing that I have a right to be in that country as a visitor operating amateur radio. Otherwise, anybody that contacts me and gets a QSL card from me and submits it for PJ2 credit won't be able to get the credit. So they're very strict about that. Now, flip over to the IOTA program for a minute. The IOTA program is a program for contacting ocean-based islands around the world. Currently, there are 1,250 IOTA designations around the world. Now, I haven't been chasing IOTAs for decades. I've only been doing it since the mid-90s. I'm somewhere, I think, about 660 confirmed out of 1,200. So there's a lot of room there for chasing islands, while these ban conditions are making it impossible to get Bouvet Island, or for anybody to get to Bouvet Island.
You've had what, 2 or 3 failures in the last
Two.
couple of years?
Two.
I know Bob Alton was one of them.
Yeah, that was a real shame. I mean, they
They were close.
They were literally, they could reach off the boat and touch the rock. That's how close they were. When the engine gave out on the boat.
Both engines.
Yeah. But one entirely, and one, they just didn't want to take a chance that it would sustain 5 days of idling there, and then 7 days of idling, and then back.
That boat, Murphy, was alive and well.
Yeah.
They had multiple failures.
Yeah. But I did work them in about a half a dozen grid squares as they were sailing across. What's his name? W6IZT was supposed to make up QSL cards for those grid squares, but I guess that got lost in the shuffle.
That had to cost them a fortune.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, DXing is your magic earphones to the world. And what does this mean? Well, I've been doing it a long time. I'm married to a girl who loves the fact that I've got a hobby that keeps me happy. She supports it. We travel around the world to do radio stuff.
Is she licensed?
No. No, and I've never pushed her to get licensed. She's every now and then I see her sitting in front of the computer, in front of QTH or one of those programs that have sample tests, and I ask her what she's doing, and she says, "Well, maybe I want to take the test." Well, if you do, you do. If you don't, you don't. I've got a kid who N1 NJZ. He got his license because I pushed him when he was in high school at the old technician level. The call has been on the air one time. And that's when he was one of those young Republicans in his high school class, and when the Barry Goldwater Radio Club comes on once a year, this goes back decades, I worked Barry Goldwater's station, his club, using N1 NJZ so I can get him a QSL card. And that's the only time that call has ever been on the air. So I've learned my lesson. If she wants to get licensed, great. If she doesn't, that's great too. But she has supported the hobby for almost 50 years.
Just hand her the credit card, right?
That's it. All right, but we travel around the world. Virtually anywhere in Europe or Asia that we go, I've got a friend. A couple of years ago, we landed in Zurich, Switzerland. I went into my QSL file before we left for the trip. I found a couple of cards from the Zurich area. I sent out a couple of emails. I got one back from a young fella that I had worked a couple of years earlier. He was now an engineering student at the Swiss University in Zurich. And he invites us to come over and see him. And I get there, and the club is waiting for me outside the train station, members of the club. They took me to the university. They took me to the radio station at the university. And they couldn't have treated us better. And this has happened a number of times when we go places. So it's a hobby that opens up doors well beyond electronics and airwaves and etc.
I would just like to mention that if you talk to a foreign country or you talk to anyone on the air, I think it's very important that you're an ambassador from the United States, and you treat it very respectfully and use good operating techniques and that type of thing. So they're pleased that they made the contact.
Absolutely.
That's one of the phrases that was used back in the late 50s. We were the ambassadors to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you look at the old ARL handbooks, it's right in there.
That's right. DXing can be done on any band, any mode. You don't have to be a CW operator to DX today. Does it help? Certainly CW is going to cut through the QRM and QSB on the bands better than modulated phone. Certainly. But it's not an absolute must. You could do it by phone, you could do it by CW, you could do it in a digital mode. In the conditions we are today, some of the digital technology that has come out, for instance, FT8, is phenomenal. Now at the Southeastern DX Club, if you get there at dinner time before the club meeting starts, there'll be two sides of the table. One side will tell you that FT8 is not an amateur radio operating mode.
Fake radio.
Yeah. The other side will tell you, gee, I made contacts around the world today in FT8. I was telling Larry, last night, my operating style in the evenings is I've got my iPad or my phone here, and if you're not familiar with it, DX Summit, one word, DXSUMMIT.FI, as in Finland, is a very popular DX spotting program, freeware. I've got it running on my phone. Commercial comes up on the TV. I see something on there that looks interesting to me. I dart up the stairs. I've got my radio on. I've got my amp on standby. And I've got my FT8 program running at night. And there he is, Algeria. The expedition going on right now. 30 meters. I don't have Algeria on 30 meters. I click the button. The commercial is still running downstairs. I think it was like the third try of my transceiver. I connect. And as you know, if you've played with FT8, it's a 15-second transmission, key down, followed by a 15-second receive mode, and it repeats like that. In 45 seconds, we exchanged signal reports and 73s. They're in the log, and I'm back downstairs before the commercial is over. My wife says, any success? It's a great mode. And by the way, I didn't have a chance to throw the amp on, so I was making that contact somewhere under 100 watts. Sonoy, home of the Walking Dead, Algeria. And the point that I make in my book is that there's life beyond the DXCC awards program, as we've been talking about this evening. It's not the only awards program in the world. And friends say to me, well, DXCC is where it's at. When I'm finished with that, I'll take a look at the next one. My comment back is, life is kind of short. You might want to work on a couple of them at the same time. Because if you work Algeria for the DXCC program, guess what? It also counts in the Work All Europe program. It counts in the CQ DX program. CQ magazine also has a Work All 340 of them, and a niftier looking certificate than the DXCC certificate. So you could be playing in a number of different programs at the same time. I kind of wish that in the 80s, when 6 meters was wide open, I had thought about DXCC on 6 meters. I could have had that certificate a long time ago if I had done that. But I didn't. Everybody was talking about 40 and 20 and 15, and I didn't even know 6 existed. Now, we're waiting for the next sunspot cycle. Or, as I just saw, a number of us are on K4PI's blog, and he's hot on 6 meters these few years. And this past cycle, June, July, August into September, I was able to pick up 7 new entities on 6 meters by watching his emails. He'd watch for an opening, he'd put it out immediately, even before he worked the entity that he was hearing, and a whole bunch of us were able to ride into new entities on 6 meters as a result of a lot of work that he was doing. But I'm still a good 17 or so away from DXCC on 6 meters, and a season could go by and you only get 2 or none. It's a tough band in the best of times, and with the conditions now, most of the contacts we're making are FT8 contacts on 6 meters, an occasional CW. Don't even bother to put the mic on the rig.
Yeah.
Jeff, what kind of antenna do you use?
On 6, I've got a 7-element Force 12 extended boom beam. It's up 60, it's up 75 feet.
That'll do.
Well, K4PI has like 7 over 7 over 7 at 100 feet.
Whoa. That's
Did you
some
see,
serious,
did you
that's
see
some serious
the
hard
antenna farm they have in Croatia?
Yes,
Isn't that
yeah.
something?
Well, why do we do it? It's fun.
Yeah,
I mean, it's in your blood.
it's a challenge.
I got into the hobby in grade school. I had a friend, my call at that time was WB3 Delta Lima Golf, Baltimore, Maryland. Friend next door was one of these child prodigies in electronics. In his basement, he never passed a thrown away TV set without carting it home and cannibalizing it. And his basement had shelves and shelves and shelves of every possible tube in the world, capacitors, resistors, the whole 9 yards. And the kid knew how to put the stuff together.
What about you, was it, Charles?
Everything was homebrew. And on top of that, he could be sitting, holding a conversation with you, listening to a 35, 40 word a minute QSO in the background, and he could keep up with both conversations at the same time.
That's impressive.
It was. And he got it, it got in my blood watching him and learning from him, Elmering by him, until eventually I got my novice license. Never could develop the code speed that this kid had, but enough to be able to at least do a 599 thank you QSO on the
Yeah,
air.
that's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
That's all it's needed.
Technical challenge, building antennas, listening to others' ideas about what would make a better wire antenna or a better beam antenna or a better setup. Getting the stuff put together, playing with it, testing it. The international goodwill of the hobby. Scientific DXpeditions. The club, the Southeastern DX Club, has sponsored on an annual basis any number of scientific DXpeditions where groups of scientists, doctors, etc., go into a country, obviously a third world country, and they split their time between their professional endeavors and amateur radio. And I have a couple of pictures of QSL cards coming up here shortly that'll show you some of these. And those, the Cordell DXpeditions being one that we've sponsored any number of times over the decades that the club has been around. And these are particularly interesting because they're doing world goodwill as well as goodwill on the airwaves. And the club does not miss an opportunity to throw a couple of $100 or more at some of these endeavors. Actually, the Bouvet, our guys' Bouvet DXpedition had an element of that in it as well, because Bob and the crew had been working with the government over there on weather experimentation, etc., and where they were going to set up was an area that was complementary to the government's weather service scientific endeavors as well. And the club did, I think our contribution was close to $5,000, of which we did get back some of that.
One of the most interesting parts is listening to these guys at the Southeast DX Club and other places. You listen to, like Bob Alphin and some of the others, some of the nightmares that they have to go through for weather, dealing with the government. My hat goes off to these guys that go out there and do that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, some of the countries' governments are not all that knowledgeable and or friendly about the hobby or to the hobby. One of the toughest governments to be able to work through and around to get permission to get onto some of the geography and real estate that we want to put on the air is the United States government. The U.S. Park Service has given groups of amateurs all sorts of hoops to jump through. KP1, the Vasa group down in the Puerto Rico area, that's a fish and wildlife protectorate. Several clubs.
I think that's the worst department, is the fish and wildlife.
Yeah, so several clubs have attempted to get permits to go on there. KH3, one of the Hawaiian island chain islands. I've needed that one for decades. KH3 is a fish and wildlife protectorate. The Hawaiian clubs have not been able to get permits to set up. Hawaii State QSO party 3-4 weeks ago. I had been emailing back and forth with a gent in the Honolulu Radio Club because for them to go onto the island, to put the island on the air as part of the QSO party, it was a shorter trip than I made to come here tonight. They couldn't get permission from the government to be able to get on there to do it. And that one is number 5 or number 6 most wanted on the DXCC list. KH3.
I lived in Hawaii 3 years at a cave, 6 colors, and I couldn't even use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're not permitted on the island, and what the clubs are asking for is an extended stay in an area that the government would dictate. You can be right here, but nowhere else, and then you have to pay for the guards overtime to guard you so that you don't step out of that circle, and they won't do it.
And they made sure every grain of sand was in the same place when you stepped on it.
Yeah.
There was one club, remember that, Cherie, that they had to take a representative of the Fish and Wildlife with them.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes.
they had to provide all the support for the fish and wildlife.
Howland Island was that way.
Mm-hmm.
They had to take a representative with them.
Yeah. Well, Ken, LA7GIA, he's a very active amateur from Norway that CDXC has been supporting over the years. He's one that has done programs such as Doctors Without Borders in the Democratic Republic of the Sudan some years ago now. These are those combined type of DXpeditions where they go into the country to do some good professionally, and in their downtime, they're operating DX for the rest of us to be able to work that particular entity.
Did you have any opportunities to contact that plane, the soloist that went all the way around the world in his airplane? Because I followed him all the way around, and I tried several times and didn't get him.
He's trying to keep that thing in the air.
Well, contesting, and I'm sure there's a number of contesters in here, is sort of a parallel, if you will, activity to DXing. Contesting is exactly that. How many stations can you contact in a given period of time, maybe worldwide or statewide or whatever the contest happens to be? Well, at the same time that you're doing that, contesters that are also DXers are also compiling DX statistics. So there's a parallel between the two, a reason to do one to support the other, that becomes very interesting. I'm not a contester, however, at the PJ2T station for the last couple of years, I've done contesting. In 2017, we came in second worldwide as PJ2T in multi-multi. And then in 2018, we came in number 5. However, we also came in number 1 on the island of Curacao. They asked me how many stations were operating on the island. However, the certificate they sent us said number 1 Curacao.
I'm not gonna argue with that.
I didn't. Well, this is dated, of course, now, but the 2020 is coming up, the World Radio Team Championship, and that's always fun to think about. My wife and I are thinking about going back to Europe, to Frederikshavn in 2020, about the time that it'll be going on, to see how close we could get to watching it firsthand and seeing how it plays out.
If you go back to Germany today, do you have to, what do you have to do to operate over there? Do you
Well,
have
for a short
permissions
period
you
of
have to
time,
get?
just with a copy of your license and operating within the constraints of your license in DL, you just sign DL
It's a
stroke.
reciprocal agreement then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the basic DX Century Club DXCC award. This is the basic award. You could get it as a mixed award, which means you've worked 100 entities, maybe some of them sideband, maybe some of them CW, maybe a couple digital, maybe some on 20, some on 15, some on 10, maybe there's an 80 in there, doesn't matter. So long as you've worked 100 separate entities across the bands, across the modes. That's the basic DXCC award. Now, I've used the term entity multiple times tonight. What is an entity versus a country?
Well, it's a recognized place,
Location.
location, not necessarily a country.
A rock.
Yeah. Yeah, when Hiram Percy Maxim, the first president of the ARRL, Hiram Percy Maxim, conceptualized this awards program, he set it up to transcend countries, islands, and special jurisdictions. And that term became entity. There are 340 entities. They're not all countries.
Scarborough Reef. 7 rocks out in the Pacific.
Yeah. The Vatican. The Vatican.
Yeah, Cuba, because you got Guantanamo.
Yeah. Guantanamo Bay. KG4. Curacao, tiny country, PJ2. The UK bases at one point, Z Charlie 4. All right, some of them are territories, some of them are political entities, some of them are countries. The United States, K or W. But then we also have Puerto Rico, KP4. Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, KP2. Hawaii, State of Hawaii, KH6. All entities. So for the basic award, you need to work and confirm 100 of them. Then there's the IOTA program. To qualify for the basic IOTA award, you need to work 100 IOTA islands. Now, IOTA islands, not US islands, that's a separate award. The IOTA program has a manual about yay thick, written in British English, that describes the award parameters and what constitutes an IOTA island. It's an ocean water, typically an ocean water island, typically further away from a mainland than Staten Island is from Queens. Different parameters.
Are you going to be covering split operations for you're receiving and transmitting on different frequencies?
We could talk about that. Okay, so 100 of those can get you started in the Islands on the Air program. Overlap, I said. Maybe not waiting to do one before you start the other. Overlap. Curie Island, KH7K is its prefix, international prefix. In the IOTA program, it's Oceania 020. So if you work Curie Island, you could credit it towards DXCC. You can credit it towards Islands on the Air program. Worked all Europe. Well, not Oceania. Johnston Island, KH3, DXCC program, Oceania 023. Guam, KH2, Oceania 026. Midway Island, KH4, Oceania 30. And then everybody is familiar with Robben Island, which has a ZS, South African prefix, which is Africa 064. Sir?
Is there a list of the island on the air?
Yes. IOTA-world.org. IOTA-world.org. That's the web page for the Islands on the Air program. And then over on the extreme right-hand side, there's a button for documentation. And if you pull that down, the IOTA manual is on there in about 6 different files corresponding to continent. So if you wanted to see what islands in Europe, or look up an island in Europe, you would pull that down and then pull out a PDF file that would open up to give you all of those islands. On there, you can also establish a file for yourself as you work islands and get confirmation and put them in there. When you have 100, you can hit the application button and apply for the award. The IOTA program has grouped the world's oceans islands into some 1,200 IOTA groups. Now it's about 1,250. Currently, there are 1,250 island groups worldwide, 22 different award certificates available in the program. So it could keep you busy while you're waiting for new DXCC to pop up. This is a sort of the very basics of what constitutes an IOTA program. Located in the open sea, not a lake or a river, must be natural, not man-made, must be above water at high tide. This differs from the DXCC program, where there are a couple of entities that don't meet that criteria anymore. So if a DXpedition wanted to go out and work that particular island, they'd have to take scuba gear.
Imagine that.
And some of us that are very active in the DXCC program have been pinging on our Southeastern Division representative to the DX Advisory Council at ARRL, asking the question, why does this entity still exist in the program? And the answer is political. The answer is because there are so many DXers that are active in the league and etc. that don't want to give up that current number, that won't let us vote against it. Remember I said on your credit slip, there's a column that says total and there's a column that says current. If they take the entity off the list, it's no longer current, it's total. And that person's standing on the current list goes down. And since there aren't other DXpeditions out there right now to make up for that individual, they don't want to lose that standing.
Well, that rock is still there.
You just have to dive to see it.
Cobb Island.
Must have a recognized island name. In other words, geographers recognize that rock. No minimum size, but needs to be shown on Google Earth or other officially recognized reference map. That's what IOTA's program says constitutes a legitimate island for IOTA purposes.
So is Great Britain an iota?
Yes, it is. Yes. You want to know what number it is?
I mean, you might as well tell me.
I don't know. I'd have to go on and look it up for you. But it is. It is. And it's not Europe 001, I can tell you that. This is the Worked All Zones certificate. This one we haven't mentioned yet tonight. Worked All Zones is an awards program sponsored by CQ Magazine. And it's for working the world's zones. It's a multiple level award. So you can get the first one with how many? I'm forgetting how many it was. Probably something like 100, maybe less. Mixed mode was the one that I applied for back when. Again, mixed is mixed. Any band, any mode. Work 100, all 100, or 800. Get confirmation of it, and you could apply for that kind of program. And Worked All Zones is a buildable type program. After I worked this one, I went back and I started working towards 5-band Worked All Zones. And I guess it was around 2015 or 2016 when I decided I wanted the certificate for 5-band Worked All Zones. And as long as I was at it, there was also a category called Walk Band Worked All Zones, 17, 30, and 12. So I went into my cards. I now have, 10 or so boxes of QSL cards up on the shelf. Took the chart for the 5-band award, asked my computer program, and logging in doing DXing is essential. You've got to have a dependable, backed up, computer-based logging program. Can't do it in the old ARRL paper laws. Just too difficult. All right, so I have a program that was written by a gent here in Georgia. I've used, it's only the second program I've ever used. I went from a DOS-based program to that one in the early 2000s, I guess. And I asked the program to do a report for me by zone. There's a program in there called Worked All Zones, so the computer knows what it's looking for. It goes into the individual log creations. Every time I log a station, it automatically, based on the prefix of the station, it assigns a zone to it. If it's the wrong zone, I have to manually change that. The program goes in there, pulls out the zones according to the application, gives me a printout. I now know how many zones I have on how many bands and where the holes are. I go into the boxes, I start pulling out the cards, I start lining them up. I must have had, I don't know, 25 to 3,000 cards when it was all said and done. Okay, who checks CQ World War Zones for CQ Magazine? They don't do it themselves in Hicksville, New York, where they're based. They have volunteers that they have trained and certified for their awards program. And the closest one, as it turns out, was a fellow that I know was going to be at the International DX Convention in Visalia, California in April of that year. So I contacted him and I said, will you do me a favor? CQ says you're legitimate for this awards program. I'm looking at 5-band plus walk band. Will you do it? And he came back and said, glad to help. That poor fella sat with me for the better part of an afternoon in a conference room in the hotel where the convention was, going through those cards, matching them against the application, making sure the card was legitimate, et cetera, checking it off. I mean, I took this guy and his wife out for dinner after that. I mean, that was arduous, absolutely arduous. But he did it, and I managed to get the award, and there was another one checked off on the list of awards that I was interested in. 5-band worked all continents, a hell of a lot easier than zones. Hell of a lot easier. This one is an International Amateur Radio Union, IARU award. IARU awards are administered by RSGB, the Radio Society of Great Britain. A friend of ours, Larry Price, W4RU. Anybody know Larry? Larry was president of ARRL and then went on to be president of the International Telecommunications Union. After that, he was a college professor at Georgia Southern University in Statesboro. He passed away a month ago down in Statesboro, and the club sent a award honorarium to the ARRL Spectrum Foundation in his honor this past month.
Did you know Guy Shields by any chance?
No. Here's a good one for folks starting out in DXing to see if it's something that you're really wanting to stay with. The Worked All States Award. The basic, work and confirm the 50 U.S. states. Mixed, any band, any mode. And then the one after that is do it on 5 bands. That's challenging. You can certainly work all 50 states reasonably easy on 20 meters, especially if you do it on contest weekends or worked all QSO party weekends. You know, it's doable. Get to 80 meters. Now you got to stay up a little late. Do it on 160 meters. Now you got to have a bottle of schnapps with you when you stay up.
You do 160?
Sure.
I do.
Yeah.
What kind of antenna?
I built an inverted L that runs up the length of my tower, starts at the 8-foot point, that's where the feed point is, runs up to the 70-foot point. It's 130 some odd feet, and the rest goes out over the trees. And then I've got 4 raised radials at 8 feet that come out at 90 degrees. And that plays beautifully. That coupled with a receive array, because on 160 you need a good receive antenna.
Now, how directional is that?
Well, the receive array has a 4-point switch box. So if I wanted to receive to the north, I got 2 dip switches. It's doable. It just takes patience. But you can do it.
And some land.
Huh?
And some land.
And a little bit of land, yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about the hows. I'm hearing that a lot of you are already on the HF bands, and this is not limited to HF. VHF is viable too. It's just a little bit more challenging at times. Nets, rag chewing, even Aries to some degree give you venues to get on the air and be able to do some long distance communications and some working beyond the boundaries of the South, of the United States, and spreading out a little bit. And you could do it any mode. As we were talking tonight, some of you might have worked the recent CY9C, St. Paul Island operation that was on for a couple of days. Anybody work them? St. Paul Island. Not too far away, but it is good DX. 7 Victor 9 Alpha, Algeria was on 3 weeks ago as a D expedition. Anybody work them? Good. This one was a challenge. 6 Oscar, 7 Oscar, Somalia. It's a multi-European operator D expedition.
I'm surprised that one's not forbidden. They like to go out and get our ships.
No, they were there, and they seemed to be doing all right. I needed 6 Oscar on 40 meters. I also needed them on 160, but I wasn't probably going to hear them on 160. But I needed them on 40 meters. Now, you asked about split. They were operating split. Most D expeditions will operate split. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Right? If you know, I do see them occasionally where they come on and they have an operator that is operating simplex. And then you start watching the spots on DX Summit and some of the other spotting programs, and you start seeing people pleading with them, go split, go split, go split. What does split mean? That means they are transmitting on a given frequency. They're asking you to transmit on another frequency where they're listening. So that they're not trying to pull your signal out from 900 other signals coming in on exactly the same frequency. Picture yourself sitting in front of a radio where 900, and I'm not exaggerating in terms of number.
That's conservative.
Signals are coming in on the exact same frequency. All you're hearing is noise. Being able to pull out a part of a call sign might take you 5 minutes. Sir?
You should add that oftentimes they'll run a range.
Yes.
Listening a range of listening.
Yes.
So that way the 900 people are spread out within
Yeah.
10 or 20 kc.
Right. Yeah. So 6070 is on 7222, somewhere around there. And He's sending out he's identifying 6070 up, up, up. Now, up means he's working split and he wants you to transmit up. The convention in CW is, unless otherwise stated, up is 1 KC.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, come on.
No, I thought it was 5.
Now that's sideband.
Oh, okay.
All right? That's the convention. So if he's saying up, up, and you're watching the spotting programs, which you absolutely have to do, don't operate in the blind if you're DXing. You've got computer spotting programs, you've got hams worldwide, and they're giving you good information. The information might be 6070 just went active on such and such frequency. 6070 is listening up 2-5, which means he's listening up somewhere between 2 and 5 KC up from where he's transmitting. But this guy is saying up, up, okay? So I throw my rig into split. There's a split button. You push the split button, the second VFO is invoked. It automatically copies whatever the first VFO says, and then you turn the knob to where you want to go. So you turn it up 1 KC, throw on my heater, my amplifier, because there's no point in running 100 watts when 9,000 people are calling this guy at the same time. Unless you got time to kill. All right, so I turn on the amplifier, I'm up 1 KC, I'm starting to call him, and all I'm doing is throwing my call out, K1ZN. First at a couple of 100 watts, not hearing me, a couple of 100 more watts, not hearing me, a couple of 100 more watts, and I'm watching the spotting program because I'm hoping somebody comes back and says, just worked him on 7025. So I know he's somewhere between 1 up and 7025. Now, if he never goes higher than that, if every report that comes in is showing him somewhere between but never above 7025, now I've got his geography scoped out. I've got his operating practice scoped out. Now, there's a couple of things you can do at this point. Number one, you can invest in a pan adapter. I operate an Elecraft line, the K3S. It has a pan adapter that's separate from the transceiver itself. What it's showing me is a span of frequency, and I'm visually watching the signals at my end. He's in Somalia. All I could do is see whatever my antenna is hearing. It might not be hearing Europe. And right now, this guy is working worldwide. His whole DXpedition, he worked worldwide. Some DXpeditions, the guys know what propagation is like. Like our friend going to Bouvet, they know what propagation is like. And they know when it's open to North America, fence off Europe and the rest of the world. This is 6070, North America only. QRZ, North America only. QRZ, North America only. Italian calls in, he doesn't answer them. What you learn in this hobby very quickly is the entire Italian population, every one of them has a ham radio license. I'm not kidding.
Same with Japan.
Well, Italian, no matter what you're calling, they're coming back.
Yeah, that's all I get.
You could try to notch them out, they're coming back. This guy is working worldwide 100%. So no matter what the propagation is worldwide at any given time on any given band, he's open up to the world. So now you've got 3 KC worth of geography. Everybody calling them from all four corners of the world. Good luck. 4 nights. From dinner time until around 1 o'clock in the morning on 40 meters. God love Ellercraft amplifiers. This thing stayed with me. But no way, no heck was I able to break through that pilot.
Take a field day 10 times over.
Now, you usually start out at a low wattage.
Well, the rule is use as little power as is necessary to make the contact. That's what Part 97 says. That's what the good DX manual says, Code of Conduct says. So you start out, and quite frankly, anybody could make a contact with 1,500 watts plus. So you start out with a couple of hundred. After a reasonable period of time, you boost that up a little bit. Before you boost it up, you start looking for other clues. What is his split spread? What is his operating practice? What do I see on my pan adapter? Is there a hole in there where I could plant my transceiver and attempt to get him? But again, my pan adapter is showing what my antenna in Sonoy is hearing. He's on the African continent and he's listening to 6 other continents. So I don't know where those holes are. I can only guess. Generally speaking, if I know a fixed range that the station is operating in, I go for the law of averages. I park myself right in the middle, hoping he's got to hear me coming up or coming down. I just plant myself there and I stay there. If you keep moving around, he's moving around, and the two of you might never meet. So I found the best luck is plant myself dead center and hope he catches me coming or going. Yes, sir.
You might want, I was just thinking, you might want to add that on some of the new modern radios that you have 2 VFOs, you can actually listen to him and tune around and listen to the splits through another speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So you can determine the last person he contacted, and sometimes you can be lucky and hit.
Yeah, and on the K3 line, you can do that as well. There's a reverse button, and when you know he's listening or waiting for the other station, you hit the reverse button and you quickly move your VFO to see if you can catch it.
Right. Yeah.
I haven't tried in a long time. Is the South Pole still on?
I don't know of anybody operating right now. You mean from the U.S.?
Right. The South Pole has a station down there that used to operate, and they give you 2 hours a day for normal contact.
KC4 USA.
Huh?
KC4 USA. I operate that station.
Wow.
I tried to contact them a number of times, never made it, but it was fun listening.
You're just working, stick my rope. The cell cards at the house.
You don't need elaborate equipment to have fun with DXing. A basic transceiver, new, modern, dated, really doesn't matter, so long as you have split capabilities, the capability of using a second VFO. Digital signal processing helps, because there are times when the band gets noisy, when you've got to filter out stations on either side of you that are interfering with you. Wire antennas are fine. You don't need elaborate, expensive beams. A basic 100 watts can do just fine as you're getting your feet wet and getting more and more excited about it. You could add power later on. Logging, as I said, is essential. You've got to know who you work. Yes, sir?
What log do you use?
Mine is called Logic. Logic 9, I believe, is what I'm on right now. The web page for the gent here in Georgia that has developed the program and sells it is easy to remember. HOST HOSENOSE.com. Hosenose.com.
You read that, H-O,
HOSENOSE.com. Hosenose.com. Dennis is the gent. He's an IT type. He's also a ham, but not a very active ham. He developed a very nice product. It's got enough bells and whistles to keep anybody happy. It is not a, what's that popular?
N3FJP.
No.
N1MM or N3FJP.
No, it's
Ham Radio Deluxe.
yeah, it's not Ham Radio Deluxe. It's not Ham Radio Deluxe. And I say that with a smile on my face.
Log 40.
It's a basic logging program with enough bells and whistles that in this 30 some odd years I've been using it, and I've upgraded every time Dennis has come out with a new version of it, I can't find anything I can't do with it. I could sort, I could search any way necessary to find data in that logging program.
and this will hand in hand with ARRLs.
Yes, it's got ADIF export capabilities. It's got LOTW. In fact, I did that this morning in 15 seconds. I uploaded my log to LOTW.
Too bad you can't get log book of the world in 15 seconds.
Become familiar with the band plans. The band plans. And not just the band plans that we in this part of the world operate with. You've got to know the band plans in other subdivisions of IARU. Because you will come across stations that are calling CQ and operating in a European or an Oceania portion of the world that we are not allowed to go and operate in that particular mode in. So you've got to familiarize yourself with those and become knowledgeable of them, especially if you're operating split on 40 meters.
So how do you do that? If you're not allowed,
Well, you can't. That's the point. You've got to wait for that station to migrate into the territory that you're allowed to play ball in before you're able to work it.
60 meters is that way too.
Yeah. Well, 60 meters is not a DXCC band.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do you find that? ARRL's webpage. Very easy to pull it up. Very quick. In fact, it's easier for me to go onto the league webpage sometimes and pull up the band plan than it is to open the drawer and dig through it at my station. It's easier to find. It's there. Use it. Become familiar with the DX clusters. Now, I suggest DX Summit. DXSUMMIT.FI, Finland. Why? It's fed by virtually every DX cluster in the world. So rather than have 2 or 3 or 4 of them running on my computer screen, I keep DX Summit running and I'm getting everything there is to get. And it has enough filters that if I don't want to see everything, but I want to see just one band or just one mode or just the IOTAs, I could pull down the menu and click it and it will filter out everything but what I want. It can also interact with other programs that you have running. So if you want to be alerted, and this is neat, but I've never really worked it out for myself, you could have your log interface with the spotting program and give you a verbal cue when something comes up that you need because it's not in your log. Now, where else can you do that? Club log, clublog.org, clublog.org. Developed by a British ham. It's a multi-tool program that helps spotting, that helps you identify entities that you need that are not in your log. You can go on to Club Log. Doesn't cost anything. It's freeware. It's open source. You can go on there, establish a file for your call sign, upload your log into it, and then go into it, and it will give you, you could say, I want to know how many entities for this particular award I need, and based on the data you uploaded, it comes back and shows you what you have and what you need. Where do I fit in terms of all US hams that are using Club Log that are DXers? It goes into my log, it calculates where I am against the standings of everybody else that ever calculated, and comes back and tells me where I stand. That and 25 cents won't get you on the New York subway anymore, but sometimes it's interesting to know. What entities do I still need, and how many other people still need them? I can go in there and it'll tell me that. Now, that's important. That's actually data that I do need, because the Southeastern DX Club, we get applications from DXpeditioners wanting us to donate money to them. As treasurer, my job is to tell the club membership, for somebody applying for money, where that particular DXpedition that they're going is in terms of how many people need that entity for DXCC. So that kind of information, at least to me, is important. And in a couple of seconds, I can pull that off of clublog.org. Clublog.org also has a spotting capability, and a very good one. Okay, so I get on the radio at 6 a.m. on 40 meters. What's going on 40 meters that is of interest to me at 6 a.m.? Well, I uploaded my log last night into Club Log, so Club Log has my latest and greatest information. I go into spotting, log spotting, and I pull down 40 meters, and now everything coming out of that program is telling me, based on what it sees coming in on the spots on 40 meters, what it sees in my log that I don't have. So all it's showing me are entities that my log says I don't have on 40 meters. Now that's pretty significant information for me. Now if there's something on there that I need, it tells me where, what band, well, 40 meters, where on 40 meters it is. I spin over there and I listen for it. And if I can hear it, I know darn well I better work it. Club Log is a good tool for DXers. So you get into this hobby, aspect of the hobby a little bit more, and you start whetting your appetite for some good information. The weekly DX newsletter, published by a fellow named Bernie, W3UR, in Maryland, is now the only weekly publication left for DXers. Bernie is starting to walk around with a big smile on his face. There used to be several of these, but those guys became silent keys, leaving Bernie all by himself. The cost of this, quite frankly, is kind of negligible. I don't even remember annually what it is, but it's not a whole lot. He sends it in PDF format. You could buy a daily subscription, which, even if you're sitting in your radio 10 hours a day, I just don't see a need for it daily. But weekly, it's good to have, because this guy might have worked for the CIA at one point in his life because he's able to dig down and get information on who's going where a year ahead of time like nobody's business. I don't know how he does it, and he's certainly not going to tell anybody how he does it, but he must get feeds from people all over the world. Bernie does a Skype presentation for our club about once a year and gives us the skinny on what's likely to be coming up in the next 12 months. And periodically throughout the year, he'll put announcements out as well. This came in yesterday, I believe, for the week. It's announcing the Pitcairn CQDX sideband contest. The Seychelles Islands S7 is coming up. Swains Island KHS/S is coming up. He's talking about another Somalia DXpedition. Maybe I'll hit that one. 3 Whiskey, Vietnam is coming up. He's got an Islands on the Air column for IOTA chasers. And the amazing part is I spent 2 years on the board of directors of the Islands on the Air program, and Bernie had better information than I did about what was going on.
And what's the name of that?
Which we this is Weekly DX. Have a copy. So if you're looking for it, you can order it online from thedailydx.com, or just toggle Google in DX newsletter and it'll come up. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Join a DX club such as the Southeastern DX Club, sedxc.org. Membership is a cheap $25 a year. We meet the 3rd Thursday of the month at Piedmont Hospital downtown, Building 77, not third floor, was a mezzanine auditorium. What's the name of the auditorium? There's only one auditorium. It's next, Rich Auditorium, next door to the food court. We meet at 7. We eat at 6. Actually, we start eating at 5:30.
And you might comment that the cafeteria closes
At 6.
at 6.
At 7.
At 7.
At 7. Yeah.
Do you do anything with summits on the air?
Personally, no. Good operating practice. This is irrespective of DX. This is period. Be familiar with the DX Code of Conduct. It's kind of basic, but even being basic, people don't follow it the way they need to follow it. You don't call on top of another station. You don't attempt to operate on top of another station. You listen before you transmit. One of the biggest disappointments that DXers see on the air is that if a station is operating in a DX mode, calling CQ in a DX mode, make the assumption the station is operating split.
Yes. Yes.
If that's not the case, you'll learn it quickly enough, but at least you won't be interfering with somebody else.
There'll be about 10 people to tell you.
Right, but make the assumption that it's a split operation. Listen. Listen, and then listen some more before you begin transmitting. You've seen the DX Code of Conduct many times, I'm sure.
Published in the newsletter.
Published in the newsletter. Know when and where the DX is. I've given you some clues in terms of where you can go to look. There are others. Give me a second, I know I brought some others. Maybe I didn't. but certainly spotting clusters, DX column in ARRL's monthly magazine, the newsletters. There's a number of, and I know I printed this off, there's a number of online sources. Here's another one. A number of online sources for upcoming DX, published by some amateurs. Here it is. Announced DX operations. This is published online by NG3K. His website is ng3k.com, and he does this on a rolling annual basis. By month, operations that he has identified as upcoming. So, if we're looking at October, the first one he has listed is 7 Papa 8 Alpha Oscar, Lesotho, coming up on the 1st of October through the 19th of October. Then he's got the Canary Islands, Gabon, Vietnam, St. Pierre, Vanuatu, Cyprus, British Virgin Islands, 2 Belize operations, Market Reef, another Belize operation, Norfolk Island, Bermuda, St. Andrews, Mayotte, Aruba, Malta. This is all October. Vietnam, Pitcairn Island, Lock and Swap Island, Comoros, and Vietnam. So when people say there isn't a whole lot of DX on, well, that might not be the case. So if you subscribe, well, it's not subscribe, it's free. If you look at a list like this, keep your eye on the newsletter, keep your eye on the spotting programs, you'll know when and where the DX is. The next thing you got to do is, okay, it's out there, can I hear it? And that means checking propagation. And there's a number of ways that we do that. One is, you look at DX Summit's main screen, up on the right-hand side, it's got a propagation index indicator. It's reading off of your computer's location. So what it's telling you is what propagation by time of day and band is looking like from your location. Okay, how accurate is that? Well, Southeastern DX Club makes an annual donation to the Northern California DX Foundation, who operates reverse beacons. Reverse beacons are volunteer amateurs around the world that allow their equipment to be used for pinging purposes. So if I'm interested in 40 meters, I go on 40 meters, I dial down somewhere around 7022, and I activate the program on the NCDXF website. I start sending a series of V's and my call sign, and I wait a couple of seconds, and the beacon comes back and tells me if it can hear me and at what S signal level. And if it comes back and says, not there, sorry, Charlie, it tells me there's no propagation going out west on 40 meters at that particular time. So I'm able to tell, based on these various tools, how likely it is that sitting on 40 meters at that particular time of day, listening for one of these stations that I know is out there because I see spots from around the world telling me they're up and operating, whether it's worth my time or maybe I need to come back some other time. Cluster spots, beacons, reading propagation charts, these are all tools to ensure that you have some success having sat in front of that radio and attempted to make the contact. Use standard phonetics. Very important. the fancy stuff might be nice on south cars in the morning. But if you're DXing, remember, most of the world does not speak English as a first language. There are places where they have enough English to be able to do DX, even in CW. But if you don't use standard phonetics, you're placing yourself at a disadvantage. It's standard for a reason. Yes, sir? No, sorry. Not a whole lot of us have to tune up anymore. I do know on occasion I will hit the transmit tune button on the K3 for the purpose of checking SWR, but we don't, for the most part, we don't tune up anymore. But be careful where you do that and when you do that. I have an MFJ high power dummy load cam. I've got it set up on my multiple switches. If I need to check for any reason, I hit that position and I transmit into the dummy load. That still can send RF out, but not nearly what would happen if I did it into a live antenna. No point in calling a station if you hear other people calling a station, that particular station, and you can't hear them. What's likely to happen? Well, maybe he will hear you, but you can't hear him. So why call him? And being a cop doesn't help the situation any. You know, if somebody does not realize that the guy is operating split, and he keeps calling on top of him, adding to the anguish isn't helping it. Hopefully, if that individual is in that aspect of the hobby where he's trying to work a DX station, he will quickly figure out that if he's not hearing anybody else come back to that guy, the guy is working split. And he'll move up where he needs to be. Okay, so we made the contacts. That's only halfway home. All of these programs require confirmation. And even if you're not into it for the paper chasing, you're certainly wanting to collect pretty QSL cards for yourself. And we could pass these around and people could take a look at them if they're interested. I just pulled out some that look better than others. Validating a contact. What do you need to put into your log? Well, certainly the call sign the guy used. You need his call sign. And double check that, folks. In a DX pile-up situation, the station is not identifying, for the most part, not identifying after every contact. Some do. And it's very annoying when they do, because they're wasting time. The operators that'll identify maybe once every 20 QSOs, or once every 5 minutes, or once every 10 minutes, are doing better than the guy that says 6070 599 K1ZN QRZ, this is 6070. Well, everybody on the frequency knows who he is because that's why we're there. But we verified it because we heard him say it at some point in time. We verified it because we see the spotting cluster has him on that frequency. But you got to know that call sign so that you're putting it in your log correctly. The location, if it's an island, the location of the contact. And this is mainly for the IOTA program, though it applies in the other program as well. The island name. Let me get one that deals more with DXCC. In the IOTA program, Club Log now has an agreement with IOTA Limited for validating the QSO electronically, so that you don't have to spend time and money sending for the card. So if you're going to play in the IOTA program, it's a good idea to establish your call sign with Club Log, set up a file in there, and then after the island operates, this is an island QSO, looks like most of these are island QSO. After the island operates and they send their verification to the IOTA program management, 30 days later, 30 days from their signing clear of their operation, they dump their data into Club Log, and then you could upload your log into Club Log, and if there's a match, it comes up instantly as validated on your application in the Club Log program. So you no longer have to send for cards. It's sort of like LOTW and the DXCC program. In the DXCC program, if the operator uploads to LOTW and you establish a file and upload to LOTW and there's a match, you don't have to send a card in for credit. And that's cut down on expenses for DXing. Now, LOTW is not an easy program to get used to, but it works. Unfortunately, the ARRL and the IOTA program are at somewhat odds, and they haven't been able to come to an agreement to allow IOTA data to be uploaded to LOTW in the same way. But Club Log is working very nicely. All right, if you want to get started in the IOTA program, again, go to iota-world.org. There's a lot of good information on there. You could start a file for your call sign as you work IOTAs. When you come to that magic 100 point, you can apply for your first award, and now you're up and running. In this geography, Dan Sullivan, W4DKS, is our point of contact. He's the guy that validates our awards. He's the guy that answers our questions. He's also a guy that's very dedicated to the program, and if he puts you on his distribution list, every time he sees or works in IOTA, he sends out an electronic heads up, and that's very helpful to us. Okay, so where do you get some more information? I like to think my book helps, and I've got a lot of this stuff in writing that can prove useful, I would hope, to you, as well as additional information. They're selling for $17.95, and I've got a handful of them up here for anybody that might be interested. Thanks very much. I will also pass around my eyeball QSO card, which has my email on it, and if you want to correspond or ask other questions, I'm more than happy to help you out.